You're listening to Discography Discussion, episode 161, Car Bomb, hosted by Dan Terry.
I bought the holy fucking shit edition of this.
And Joseph Wren. Presented by discussmetal.com. And if the only car bomb your co-host knows is Irish in nature, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe. That is Dan.
Sorry, I wish I was in a better mood.
AAA DRM is bullshit. That's what I have to say.
Yeah, I'm not super stoked. I'm trying to play Doom Eternal and I just, I can't. It won't work. It won't launch. I can understand having an outdated gaming rig, but like at that point, let me launch the game and then let me tell you whether or not it's acceptable to play or not. Because I'll concede, if it runs like garbage, I just won't, I'll get better stuff and move on. But they're not even doing that. They're making that decision for me. They're trying to say, you built your computer too long ago. So now I'm basically just sitting here with a game on my hard drive taking up 40 gigs of space that I can't play. So thank you so much for that, Bethesda. I really appreciate it.
Kind of in the mood for a little car bomb, are you?
I think it matches the type of rage. That was actually really, I think I articulated that better than I have all day.
He's not in a good mood. Nobody can see him but me right now. I mean, this is disappointment levels of pissed off. Like, not even rage, just, really, guys? This is what you've done to me? Do you know who I am? I am the Doomslayer. Well, you can't play the game. Well, I don't know what I was more in the mood for. The dissonant sounds of a guitar being drug against the wall, or the technical, we want to be whatever type of degent counting band that they are. But Car Bomb, it scratched a bit of an itch this week. I think this week's been a little crazy for all of us, and it was kind of nice just to listen to some dirty fucking dirgy metal.
Just pure aggression, and with a little bit of other stuff in there too. It's kind of like it's very much like Dillinger Escape Plan, quite literally and figuratively, in that it's a whole bunch of different ingredients all mixed together, probably from like various cleaners and chemicals underneath your kitchen sink. You put all that in a glass, but then every now and again they throw like a few maraschino cherries in there just to make sure your taste buds are still working. And that's probably the coolest thing about Car Bomb is I never know what they're going to do next. They are so spastic that it really, I haven't heard anything like this since Dillinger or Tony Danza. There are elements of stuff like Meshuggah in it, but it's like that kind of comes later. They get a little bit more structured later on, but we'll get into it. Not a whole lot of albums to go through, so it's been an interesting journey.
Well, before we conquer the Hypnotic Worm, because the spice must flow, I'm going to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, then you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher. So if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening, and now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
Well, we do love 5-star reviews here on Discography Discussion, but what I like more than that is you guys sharing the episodes, what you guys have been doing, and I love it. I love it, love it, love it. I love signing into Facebook and realizing that you guys have shared the episodes already, so I don't have to, but I do anyway. Keep it up, guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks for commenting, liking, sharing the episodes, letting people know why you like the podcast and why you continue to listen to the podcast.
2007, Centralia. It's a pretty epic sounding name.
It is, and it's actually probably their least epic sounding record. That's not to say that it's not epic. It's really hard for me to really determine what it is, to be honest, because it's probably their craziest. I mean, this is for Dillinger lovers like this. I compare this to like their Calculating Infinity album, where this is where they wanted to just show up and, no pun intended, just blow up in your face, which is what they do. This record comes in so aggressive, so heavy, so chaotic that the first time I heard it, I had to stop it like several times and start it over again. Not because it was bad, but because I just had to wrap my head around everything that was going on. It's been a while since we've talked about bands this chaotic, But I mean, if you're into stuff like Spitfire or Tony Danza or even some Converge stuff, Dillinger Escape Plan for sure. Just take that stuff, throw it all in a blender, and you have Centralia. I mean, just weirdest pick scraping noises that you've ever heard in a record like this. They don't rely on cheap tricks. Like they keep it blast beat intense pretty much throughout the duration.
It's hard for me to follow along with records like this, not because they're good, but because there was a time when everybody was trying to do the chaotic metal thing, and it was always chug on open and then make twiddly noises with your guitar pick, and everybody play in sync, and we're going to play in strange time signatures, not because we need to for the composition to move forward, but because, well, it's a thing we're doing now. At worst, this just sounds like noise. But you can't tell me that this is shit and then tell me that a record like Bitches Brew is a fucking classic. You have to be willing to take in what the band is giving you to appreciate this style. And even though you might not be into the hardcore screaming or the dissonant guitar sounds, at some point you've got to sit down and feel what the music is trying to make you feel. And this one is just trying to make you uncomfortable.
It definitely makes me feel uncomfortable. Again, I hate to keep using the Dillinger comparison, and that will get less as we go on. But the unpredictability really does make me uncomfortable and feel kind of vulnerable in a lot of ways, because I'm never really sure what's coming next. I don't know if we're about to go into like a blasting section with death vocals, or if they're just going to throw some weird clean singing out there. They don't do a whole lot of it on this record, but they just throw it in at weird places. And it's weird because it's not really melodious, so to speak. It's like they threw it in there because they knew that that's what we weren't expecting.
Sometimes I think that bands put something like this together because they're trying to make you uncomfortable, or they're trying to take away your expectations. But at the same time, when everybody was doing this, my expectation was that you were just going to make a bunch of fucking noises and eventually the record would be over. So
right.
I think it loses impact for that reason, but on its own, by itself, it has enough of that intense melody. And I do say melody because the band is obviously playing together. It's not like they're just throwing their guitars against the fucking floor and seeing what happens.
Yeah, and that was my Maraschino Cherry comparison, that they're going to throw stuff in there that's going to be very sweet to you, but only for a second, And I think the thing that threw me off was that this band was immediately awesome. I mean, this band has had the exact same lineup since the year 2000. So, I mean, that's 20 years of all the same guys. And they were good the first time. There isn't a whole lot of learning, at least not anything that I have really noticed. But I think the record stays intense because it's so short. It's only 32 minutes, and it just gets in, punches you in the face a whole bunch of times, and then gets out. And but it has the added benefit of being a record that you can listen to over and over and over again and always find new stuff. Like it is a what's the word? No, I don't know. I don't know if there's a word for that. Where you just can go back and it's jam packed with so much stuff, within that 32 minutes that it's almost like a compressed, file on your computer that you have to unpack, and so you can find a lot to go back to on this record. And a lot of people probably did. A lot of people probably did go back to this record a lot because we didn't get another release from the band until 2012. That's a long time between albums.
2012. I don't know how I'm supposed to fucking say this, so I'm just going to say whoop, 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 whoop. I'm pretty sure this is just how the band writes their songs. They just put a bunch of strange lines on the page, and then everybody gets together and says, all right, guys, let's go.
Yeah, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. I
don't think it means anything. I think it's just a thing.
You got to be careful about that, Joe. We cannot just be assuming that album titles don't mean anything. We got in trouble last time we did that. So, but what's funny is this record is more of a, I don't want to say it's an expansion on Centralia, but this is definitely where they start incorporating a little bit more of that Meshuggah sound.
Absolutely.
I would say that, Centralia was more in the realm of like a Dillinger Escape Plan or Tony Danza type of record, and probably they're influenced by a bunch of bands I've never even heard of. They're probably better than the bands I mentioned, but that's my frame of reference, so I'm just gonna go with it. Yeah, I mean, from the first second you start getting a little bit more of that like Meshuggah precision. They're still being very chaotic, but they're doing it very precisely, if that makes sense. Whereas the first CD was certainly ultra technical, this album is even more so, to the point where I started asking myself how this band remembers their songs.
And that's exactly when the music becomes memorable. This record has some of the melodic sung, I'm not going to call them choruses, but it's like they added just enough electronics to make the album flow where it wasn't flowing before. It's like the band's over here in the infrared spectrum, but somebody else was on the other side saying, hey guys, it's purple over here, come on. And everybody just started playing together.
Yeah.
I think that they spent all that time really writing these songs. It's not easy to write this kind of chaotic metal unless you're the kind of guy that's way into it. I'm sure there's somebody out there I could give a list of time signatures to and I could get a sweet fucking beat back. But most of the time it's just playing in unison, which is what this band does a lot of. And that's probably my biggest criticism, is most of the time all they're doing is playing in unison, which is kind of Sepultura-ish. It has a little bit of that rhythmic tribal vibe of just, no, everybody's going to do something together.
I think what's interesting about this record too is that this is the first one that I would say would be like progressive in the traditional sense. It's not that the previous record didn't have progressive elements in it. It definitely did, but it seemed like they were just like, let's be chaotic. And then you get to this album and you look at the cover and you're like, okay, these guys are kind of going for more of a prog slant. And you know, they definitely stepped it up a lot, and you get a lot of that Meshuggah sounding stuff. It's almost like, I guess there's no other way to put it. It's like if Meshuggah took more risks.
It's more like Between the Buried and Me with all heavy vocals and less sweet picking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love it. I think this one actually pounds heavier than the last one did. That could totally just be a production thing, but I just feel like we're a little bit more down-tuned, you know? It's not quite djenty yet. It will get there. But on this record, it's still a little bit more traditional in its approach. And the approach is the only thing that's traditional about it. Some of these records just have to be heard to be believed, because you're going to be listening and just thinking to yourself, what is even going on here, if you have no frame of reference, you know? So I just feel like, this record's awesome. I wish there was more I had to say about it, but if you're into this like chaotic techie stuff, and I want to make a distinction too between a band like Car Bomb and a band like The Chariot, or as we know when we talked about The Chariot and even old Norma Jean or even Spitfire, those were chaotic hardcore bands, like, for sure. This is a little different in the sense that it is chaotic metal. There's a much more actual calculation, no pun intended, because everybody says they are a mathcore band. But this music is much more calculated and much more planned out. It's, we just want to make a loud noise, but we want to make that loud noise as profoundly as possible. And I think Car Bomb largely succeeds in that.
2016, meta.
Ooh, it's getting meta up in here.
It's getting extremely meta in here.
So this is kind of cool. This album was produced by Joseph Duplantier of Gojira.
Anybody named Joseph that produces a record is an awesome guy.
Right? He is an awesome guy. He's in a really great band. If you haven't heard our discussion on Gojira, go listen to that, because we'll tell you all about it. But this record is, I don't want to say it's my favorite record. No, it is. Meta is definitely my favorite Car Bomb record, because it's djenty. But it's done with so I don't know, to quote November's Doom, it's done with such class. It's loud, it's in your face. This one though introduces a few more like drudging elements to it, and it's got that djenty drone to it. But at the same time, they're still doing all the stuff that they did on the previous two records, if that makes sense. They're adding they're kind of peppering different elements into the mix. This
was the first record I heard, and I was shocked to go back and hear that the band was previously more chaotic. Because when I listen to this, I get to make up genres like brutal, technical, degent, hard metal. Like, I get to just throw random words together because depending on what kind of day it is, that's what they're doing. They're just throwing random shit together. But they didn't start out just throwing random shit together. They started out throwing ideas together in a very chaotic manner. And this is the next logical progression. From the Dust of the Planet starts off, it sounds like there's a third arm playing these guitar riffs. Somebody's just got his hands on the tuners, and he's randomly tuning them up and tuning them down, which might be a staple of Degent, but the way they do it, there's a little bit more of that progressive metal that you were talking about in the last record. So it's not all dissonant, drony breakdowns. It occasionally comes out of that, but then we go back into it. And I'm sure that's what you want if you're a fan of that style, and this band might be a little too progressive for you. Because they're definitely not the most progressive band out there trying to play this way. They might be one of the most enjoyable, though.
They are very enjoyable, and I think that's because this record just blows my mind on multiple levels. How they were able to incorporate like more atmospheric sounds. Because like I feel like the first two records, it was like they're going to show up and they're just going to beat you over the head so hard, and it's profound. Like you can go back and listen to it and actually find like that it's actually a little bit deeper than that. But on this record especially, you start seeing those progressive elements kind of come into the forefront, and you start realizing these guys aren't here to mess around. Like this is 16 years into their existence as a band, same guys, and they were awesome on the first record. You know, they were awesome 8 years before this, you know. So what you have here is a bunch of dudes that know what they're doing, and they have a little bit more of a sense of control. And I don't want to use the term controlled chaos because I think that's a cliche. But they have a measure of reservation, you know, on this record especially, where they're gonna go, you know, balls out crazy at times. But like that was part of the plan the entire time. It's not so much of an emotional connection as it is a all things are good in moderation. So you get those clean vocals, but they don't dominate the records. The band never sings a chorus because can you put choruses in songs like this? Are these even songs?
I guess you could if you wanted to.
There's a lot of questions that I have about records like this where it's like, can I even call these songs in the traditional sense? You know? And I don't care. I love the way that it sounds, but I think Car Bomb is an example of a band that you've probably never heard that is probably better than whatever band you like that plays this style.
This record reminds me of the first time I heard Candiria. And I admit, the first time I heard Candiria, and I consciously knew it was Candiria, was their newest album, While They Were Sleeping. When you listen to that record and you hear that progressive rock with all of the random elements that Candiria has been using over the course of their career, and they're telling you a story, you're not just getting an innovative band who's playing this style better than most of the bands you're listening to. You're hearing a band that's refined it over decades. So Car Bomb is doing the same thing. It's not just good because they've been doing it for a long time, but they've refined it. They figured out that you don't just have to drone on open dissonant chords and release 17 records of that. Sometimes you get to back off, move to the right, and then come back in. And you get to take a breath every once in a while. And the unison hits that I was a little critical of on the previous record are used to emphasize the point that the riff is not just dissonant droning. We're actually counting, and we've been counting the whole time.
And there's a certain almost of a smirk on the music where they're like, we know what's about to happen, and you don't, and you're not going to be prepared for it.
It's almost like Devo when you watch them play and they all start turning like robots. Like, you know they're going to do something cool, but it might not be right now. Okay, it might not be right now either.
Well, and it's weird, too, to have a band that is, you know, kind of starting to experiment more with their sound, that they really haven't thrown any elements in there that has put me off. either, and that's the unique thing of that these records are enjoyable from beginning to end. Number one, because they're not too long. I dropped the P word earlier, progressive, and usually that means 72 minutes automatically. This is not that band.
Or longer.
That band is Dream Theater. These guys are still about the quick gut punch. And again, they're counting on the fact that it may be a shorter experience than what you're used to with this kind of music, but you're going to go back and have to unpack it because you did not pick up everything that was going on the first time you listened to it. And that's what makes a band like this challenging for us to talk about on the show, because listening to their stuff for a week beforehand is not going to cut it. You've got to listen to these records 3 or 4 times. And I think for that reason, I was very thankful that they were as brief as they were.
2019, Mordial.
Well, this one was cool. Kind of like, did you like the last record? Without it being really the same, but more in the same style. They're continuing on that journey that they started. This is also the shortest gap between albums at like 3 years. Worth noting, too, that other than their debut record was on Relapse. Everything we've heard since then, despite how much better it sounds, 100% independent. This isn't a band getting better because they have major label backing. This is the band that got better because they're good.
And in a genre that is held to the standard of Meshuggah, they are being arguably more creative with their sound because they're not sticking to the robotic droning. Somehow, they are growing inside of a genre that is very easy to stereotype.
They are. I mean, I think if you heard the band on a surface level, you might be able to convince yourself that they're a ripoff of somebody, but you're wrong. They are a band that's playing a style you may be familiar with, but you can't sit there and tell me that you know what this band's going to do next at any point. I think that this record is a bit more droney than what we'd had previously. Like, they're really using this as a backbone. Like, they're using that Meshuggah Genty sound as kind of a backbone for their heaviness, and they're not going for the throat as much, as far as like, you're not going to go from like a metalcore section into a heavy chug into a grind section. It's just, that's not going to happen on this record. But they're going to go in a lot of weird directions, in the sense that they'll just throw in a clean vocal that you don't expect at all, that sounds beautiful, and you're actually sad whenever it's gone. It's not over the top. It's not Dream Theater. It's not like, through the stratosphere, just a dude singing, and it sounds great with that backdrop of Car Bomb in the back just beating you over the head with their heaviness. I love that about this record. I never know when the cleans are going to come in, and they're actually exciting because they're not done in a chorusy fashion. And the music on this record is overall much more melodic than what we had gotten on previous records. And again, that's kind of unexpected, though, because you don't expect that from a band like Car Bomb. You think they're just going to beat you, and they still do that. If you're only here for Godzilla, he's still here.
It's hard to talk about this album without comparing it to other bands. I think the best record by Car Bomb is Meta. I think it's the best balance of the chaotic and the droney and the dissonant and the melodic. Mordial is that band challenged to write the most melodic metal possible,
while still maintaining that heaviness. And that's hard to do because a lot of bands feel like they can only go in one direction or the other. And I'll tell you what, I found it kind of refreshing on this record that, because before, so if you want to describe Car Bomb in the most bare bone terms, the first 2 records sound like Meshuggah and the Dillinger Escape Plan had a baby. And then the third album sounds like that baby had a baby with the guys in Gojira. And this record, it sounds like that baby had a baby with the guys in Between the Buried and Me. And it's all welcome. It's all welcome change. These records don't sound the same, which is kind of a miracle considering the fact that, like, what are the words I'm trying to find here? It's kind of a miracle considering that a lot of bands in this style can only play this style and they can never break out of it. And their records start sounding the same. Car Bomb does not have that problem. None of their records sound the same. They all have a very distinctive vibe to them.
It's like on the scale of writing and recording, Car Bomb has a rule. If we do more dissonant on this record, we have to do more melody on the next record. And this was just the melody being pushed to the max. but it's Car Bomb, so they still had to be chaotic and they still had to punch you in the face with their intensity, but it had to sound nice. It's a great record. I would love to listen to this record on vinyl.
Yeah.
I think this one has the most vinyl-ready feeling, if that makes any sense.
Totally. Yeah, I would love to hear this on vinyl, actually, especially with like a good dynamic range mix on it. I think it would be just incredible. And yeah, it's definitely one of those bands that like I'm listening to them and I'm like, how have I never heard of this band? You know, it was definitely a new experience for me. I know we did one of their albums on Patreon, and that was kind of our first taste. And Joe's been pushing me for months, being like, so when are we going to get that full Car Bomb episode? And so here it is. For you guys to listen to. And I'll tell you what, man, like, it doesn't matter what we say. This is one of those bands you got to just listen to and make up your own mind. You know, I sent Buddy a text message earlier and I was like, hey dude, you really should check out Car Bomb. And he's like, which album? And I was like, anyone you want. You're gonna like all of it.
Final thoughts on Car Bomb, Dan.
You're gonna love all of it, man. If you're into this kind of music. I mean, most people who listen to this show are definitely here for that. So Car Bomb's the best band you've never heard of. They've been around for 20 years, and they're probably better than your favorite band in this style. So check them out.
When I think of those perfect records, I think of Atom Ship. I think of Colors. Sometimes I think of While They Were Sleeping, because I do think that's the best record by Candiria. That's a new fan talking. There's a certain attitude that comes with that style of music, where you're being chaotic, but you're also being metal, and you're also being melodic. And it is very hard to mess up that balance and create something that is up your own ass, and I have to buy into it to enjoy it. At no point while listening to Car Bomb do I need to buy into it. It's entertaining enough on its own, but it still has the mystery. It has that Dillinger Escape Plan style of, yeah, we're doing some shit in here, and you're going to have to listen to it 7 or 8 times, but the band pays off. If you're here for all chaos, they're going to give that to you. If you're here for all melody, eventually they're going to give that to you. And it's all good. Nothing in here is a joke or a funny or a, hey guys, check out this weird noise we made. Isn't that funny? Oh, they're making some weird fucking noises. But
for sure,
it all makes sense in the context of Car Bomb.
Yeah, totally.
Dan, what's your album of the week?
Oh man, my album of the week, that's a hard one because I've been listening to so much Car Bomb. But I think I'm going to go with Arise and Conquer by War of Ages.
For me, it's Meta by Car Bomb. That record is probably a masterpiece, but the jury is still out in the final decision. They've been deliberating for a long time.
That's awesome. Very long time. How many years is that now?
Not very many for me. I just figured them out.
Well, there you go.
All right. Take us out, DFT.
If you've ever been listening to this podcast and wish you could directly contribute to it, you can do that in a lot of ways. One of the biggest things that people like to do on this show is send us band suggestions. If you have a favorite band that nobody's ever heard of, let us know. That was how this Car Bomb episode came to be. I believe this was a Lance Alligood recommendation.
The King of Metal.
Yeah, and this dude knows how to pick some awesome bands. So if you've got another Car Bomb for us, let us know. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. You can reach out to us on Facebook at facebook.com/discography discussion. You can reach out to us on Twitter at discussmetal or at discussmetaldan or discussmetaljoe. You can send us an email at danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you don't feel like doing all that, there's a clickable form that you can fill out that'll send a band recommendation directly to us. And you can always talk to us in real time on our Discord server. There's a link in the show notes to that as well. And you can reach out to all the listeners that are on Discord. And if you ever wanted a pair of comfy socks or a t-shirt or a hoodie, we've got some really cheap prices on our Discography Discussion merch. If you just want Discography Discussion's logo plastered on everything you own, you can absolutely do that. There'll be a link in the show notes for that as well.
And on that note, this has been episode 161 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at discussmetal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion. And please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.